Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mr. B. Today we are discussing the latest development in the Iran war and other news around the world. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're following a publication called First Post out of India. I think it's a pretty um, reliable source of information. And so I have referenced them as a point of contact for us. So, with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it.
India will identify, track, and punish every terrorist and their backers.
One year ago today, India sent a powerful message across the border. It was a message that reached terror camps, military installations, and the power centers of Pakistan's security establishment. The era of absorbing terror attacks in silence was over. India would no longer sit back while Pakistan exported terror across the border. Terror networks operating from Pakistani soil would now face a direct military response. This was India's Operation Sindoor. Today marks 1 year. This was New Delhi's response to the Pahalgam terror attack, which killed 26 civilians last year. The attack shocked the country, but it also exposed a pattern India has faced for decades. Pakistan's use of terror groups as strategic proxies against India. This time, though, the response did not stop at condemnation or diplomatic statements. New Delhi decided to change the rules of the game. On the 7th of May last year, India launched Operation Sindoor, a tri-services military campaign involving the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. Precision strikes targeted many terror facilities in Pakistan, as well as in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Camps linked to Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Hizbul Mujahideen were hit. More than 100 terrorists were eliminated. But what stood out was not just the scale of the operation, it was the message India sent to its neighbor. The strikes were calibrated, precise, and targeted only terror infrastructure. Civilian areas were deliberately avoided because New Delhi's focus was only on Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. But Islamabad chose to escalate. Because you see, Pakistan is like that cocky kid in school we all knew, whose confidence is miles ahead of capability. So it responded with drones, missile attempts, and cross border attacks. But India is the school topper, so it was prepared. New Delhi expanded its response. Air bases inside Pakistan were targeted. Radar sites were struck, and strategic military facilities came under attack. New Delhi showed it could strike deep inside Pakistan with precision and without losing control of the escalation. That changed the strategic equation. You see, for years, Pakistan operated under the belief that its nuclear rhetoric would prevent India from taking a major military action. Operation Sindoor destroyed that assumption. It also exposed the failures of Pakistan's air defense network. But 1 year later, the story is no longer just about what happened during the conflict. It is also about what has changed since then. India has embedded Operation Sindoor in its security policy today. Look at what Prime Minister Modi had to say. He said, and I'm quoting here, "We remain as steadfast as ever in our resolve to defeat terrorism and destroy its enabling ecosystem." That statement matters because it shows how India now views cross-border terrorism. New Delhi does not see it as an isolated security incident anymore, but as a direct threat to our national security, one that requires a strong response. It was a message that was echoed by the Indian Armed Forces as well. In Jaipur today, top commanders from the Army, Navy and Air Force addressed a joint press conference to mark the first anniversary.
We cannot bring back our fellow countrymen who were massacred in cold blood on the 22nd of April 2025. But we can certainly resolve to ensure that such incidents are not repeated. Operation Sindoor, which remains paused, is an effort towards that resolve. Since times immemorial, we have lived with a simple philosophy of live and let live. But when our desire for peace is mistaken for weakness and our silence is taken as absence, there is no choice but to act.
That single word, paused, is important. Not ended, not closed, but paused. It sends a message that India's response framework remains active and that the red lines have shifted.
ऑपरेशन का जारी होना मतलब इज ऑल्सो मेकिंग प्रेपरेशंस, और जो तैयारियां चल रही हैं, क्योंकि कुछ लेसन्स हमने इम्बाइब किए ऑपरेशन सिंदूर से, उन लेसन्स की वजह से हमें लगा कि हमने कुछ बदलाव करने हैं अपने स्ट्रक्चर्स में, अपनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में, अपनी इक्विपिंग में.
This shows how deeply the operation has influenced India's security thinking. In fact, the lessons from those 4 days are now shaping military preparation, threat assessment, and future response strategies. You can see that on the ground too. Security forces have increased surveillance in Kashmir.
Bharat Mata ki jai! Bharat Mata ki jai! Bharat Mata ki jai!
Okay, that's the latest in terms of what's been going on with regards to the conflict with India and Pakistan. It is a possibility that that war may, reignite itself. We hope it doesn't, because of these other conflicts that's happening, abroad. But I'm going to shift now to Al Jazeera, who has some updates on, I guess, some peace conversations has been taking place between Iran and the U.S. So let's go ahead and do that now.
The U.S. military operation to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz has been put on hold after just 1 day. President Donald Trump says Project Freedom will be paused to see whether an agreement with Iran can be finalized and signed. Reports suggest Iran is reviewing a one-page memorandum of understanding to end the war and set a framework for more detailed nuclear negotiations. The deal would see the U.S. agreeing to the release of billions of dollars of frozen Iranian funds. Several countries asked for the U.S. operation on the Strait of Hormuz to be halted, including Pakistan, which is leading mediation efforts between Iran and the U.S. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif welcomed the decision and says it'll go a long way towards advancing regional peace. Now, these developments do come as Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is holding talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing. Trump is scheduled to visit next week.
The Operation Epic Fury is concluded. We achieved the objectives of that operation. I'm not going to, we're not cheering for an additional situation to occur. We would prefer the path of peace. What the president would prefer is a deal. He would prefer to sit down, work out a memorandum of understanding for future negotiations that touches on all the key topics that have to be addressed, a full opening of the strait so the world can get back to normal. He preferred that be negotiated through the route that Steve and Jared have been working and that all of us have been supporting. That's the route he prefers. That is so far not the route that Iran has chosen.
Rasool, any sort of, I suppose, a reaction to this? Any signs of diplomatic movement that you're hearing about where you are?
Well, they haven't released any statement or official reaction to specifically what the President of the United States has just posted. However, here, so yes, the diplomacy is working. So Iranians are confirming that now they have received the U.S. response to their 14 points proposal. And that proposal is in Tehran via Islamabad. So the Iranian officials are still reviewing it, and soon that response, Iranian response, is going to be sent to the Americans via Islamabad. Indeed, just yesterday, Menachem Mottaki, who is an MP in the parliament and also a former Iranian foreign minister, he said in a 2 days' time, Iran's response is going to be sent to Islamabad, and they are going to convey that to Washington. So this is the confirmed part. And of course, while Iranians are reviewing it, they say one of their motives also is to bridge the gap, because there are fundamental differences in the positions of both, between the positions of both countries. So here, there also Iranians are saying that what they're working on now is excellent and solely about Strait of Hormuz and about lifting the blockade. Anything else, whether it's Iran's nuclear program, Iran's missile program, or Iran's regional security policies, its relations with the proxies or its allies in the region, non-state allies in the region, they say that these are off table. So what Iranians are seeing, they say there is a three-phase proposal. So in the first 30 days, so they're proposing Americans to only discuss and negotiate about Strait of Hormuz, the status of Strait of Hormuz, the new regulations in Strait of Hormuz, lifting the blockade. And if they agree on the main principles of this situation in the Strait of Hormuz and the blockade in the 30 days, then they can move to the second phase. And in the second phase, Iranians are saying they're ready to negotiate their nuclear program. And if that is also succeeded, if that is achieved, then in the third phase, Iranians saying that that is not going to be about the USA, so it's going to exclusively a strategic dialogue and a security dialogue with the regional countries without the participation of the United States. So these are the confirmed points that Iranians are telling us. And they say, well, the other issues, the points that are now being circulated through the media, that Iran is ready to sign a one-page memorandum of understanding with the United States, that its nuclear program is included, regional policies on it. They say that these are fabricated. So solely at this stage, we are discussing the Strait of Hormuz and lifting the blockade. If we agree on that main principles, if we achieve a deal on this issue, then the second phase will come, Iran's nuclear program. And then in the third phase, we are ready to engage strategically with the regional countries. However, whilst
Okay, so that was the original terms of, I believe, the peace agreement that they have that has long since expired. I think there's some extensions that's taking place, but right now there are some proposals that I guess the U.S. has made over to Iran, and they are currently under review, as according to Al Jazeera as of 8 hours ago. So let's go ahead and play a little bit of that for you guys to see.
Peace deal in the late. There are conflicting messages from the US and Iran on the progress made towards a peace deal. In the latest development, Iran says it's reviewing a US proposal to end the war. The foreign ministry spokesman says Tehran will submit its response through Pakistani mediators, while President Donald Trump says the US is dealing with Iranian leaders who are, quote, very much wanting an agreement. He's also described talks over the past 24 hours as very good.
They want to make a deal badly, and we'll see if we get there. If we get there, they can't have nuclear weapons. You know, it's very simple. If we left right now Iran, it would take them 20 years to rebuild. You would call that, we're in good shape, right? Fantastic. We're in good shape. And now we're doing well. Now we have to get what we have to get. If we don't do that, we'll have to go a big step further. But with that being said, they want to make a deal. We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours, and it's very possible that we'll make it.
Bring in Rasool Sardar in Tehran for us. So, Rasool, the Iranians have the latest U.S. proposals. What have they been saying about it, and when are we expecting a response from them?
Well, there hasn't been any deadline announced by the Iranian authorities here. Just 2 days ago, Manasher Muttaqi, who is an MP in the Iranian parliament and also a former Iranian foreign minister, he said that in a 2 days' time, Iran's response is going to be sent to Pakistani mediators to be conveyed to the USA. So there are expectations that today that response perhaps is going to be sent out from Tehran. On the other hand, so the Iranian authorities are saying that some of the terms that Americans have written down for them are unacceptable, unrealistic, and maximalist. But they're saying also there has been some remarkable progress in this diplomatic engagement. So what the Iranians are confirming now, they have a proposal, and they're saying that they have a three-phase approach. In the first phase, Iranians are insisting that it's going to be exclusively about ending the war at all fronts and getting the guarantees that the war is not going to be renewed. And the guarantees must come from the United Nations Security Council, and then lifting the American blockade and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. However, while Iranians are saying that, they're also insisting that Iran is going to, one way or another, going to extend its sovereignty and control over the Strait of Hormuz, because they believe the strategic environment has changed since the beginning of the war, and Iran is not going to give up on the Strait of Hormuz. And if this first phase is achieved in the next 30 days, so they are saying that in the next phase, second phase, they are open to discuss and to negotiate their nuclear file. They're showing some certain flexibility. However, still, they're saying that they're not going to give up on the right of the enrichment, peaceful uranium enrichment. And in the third stage, this is what Iranians are saying, without the participation of the Americans, Iranians are saying that they are ready to engage with the regional countries for a strategic security new order in the region. This is what we know. And except these points, the Iranian officials are insisting that anything else at this stage, Iran's missile programs, Iran's the nuclear program, or Iran's regional security policies, its relations with the non-state allies of Iran are off the table.
Thank you very much for the update. Rasool Sardar, live for us in Tehran.
On Monday, US President Donald Trump launched Project Freedom. It was an escort mission to guide foreign ships through the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, I'm not sure if there was a delay with my mic there, but I was saying that I think that is pretty much the latest developments. I think there's a little bit of an impasse. I believe there may have been some recent developments that said that there was some bombs launched recently. Let's see. I'm going to pull that up. I don't know if these things have been verified. There's so many things going on that it's hard to determine what's relevant, what's not. And it's tough to trust sometimes our own news sources because, a lot of times they're getting their information from people who wants the narrative to read a certain way. So it's always good to try to figure out if we can, diversify and get different information. Yeah, this is what I saw recently. Let me see. Yeah, I saw on One India News, apparently there was some developments Let's go ahead and
Nighttime, northern Iraq. Streaks of light cut across the sky above Erbil, and then the explosions begin. Iranian suicide drones, dozens of them, raining down on Kurdish opposition camps. American fighter jets scramble to intercept. This isn't a movie. This happened on May 7th, 2026, and almost nobody's talking about it. The targets were Iranian Kurdish opposition groups, exiles living in northern Iraq who Tehran has long considered a threat. We're talking about factions like the KDPI, Komala, and PAK, people who fled Iran and set up base in Iraqi Kurdistan. To Iran, they're enemies. To the Kurds, they're refugees. And this wasn't a one-off. Since February 2026, there have been over 100 documented attacks on these camps, drone strikes, missile strikes, hits on refugee areas where families live. This is a sustained campaign. This latest wave didn't just hit opposition camps. Drones also flew dangerously close to Harir Air Base, a facility that hosts U.S. and coalition forces. American jets intercepted several of them mid-air. Bright explosions lit up the night sky. Some reports suggest partial impacts on nearby sites, though the full damage assessment is still coming in. Think about that for a second. Iran just launched a drone swarm in the same airspace where American military aircraft operate. That is not a small thing. Kurdish officials are furious. They're calling for stronger international air defenses. The Iraqi central government has condemned the attacks as a violation of sovereignty, but enforcement? Nearly impossible. Northern Iraq, specifically Iraqi Kurdistan, has been one of the most stable corners of the Middle East for years. It's been a refuge, a base for coalition operations, a functioning region in a broken neighborhood. Iran's repeated cross-border strikes are slowly eroding that stability. Every attack on a Kurdish opposition camp is also an attack on Iraq's sovereignty, and every drone that floats past a U.S. base is a test of American resolve. Analysts are warning that if this continues unchecked, more actors could get pulled in. The region's already on a knife's edge. The situation as of today remains fluid. Casualty numbers are still being confirmed. Kurdish media outlets are updating in real time, and the world, for the most part, is looking elsewhere. But what's happening in Erbil right now is a window into something bigger. Proxy conflict, ethnic persecution, and great power tensions colliding in one corner of Iraq.
Subscribe to One. Now, for those who are not familiar, one of the strategies I believe that the U.S. had was to arm some of the Kurdish, residents in Iran and get them to try to rise against their government. And I think maybe that plan is still in action, even though it didn't seem as if the U.S. leaned on it too much. But I do believe that they are currently trying to go about the regime change to change the power structure in Iran. And so when you see that there's attacks happening in certain parts, on the border of Iraq, and because the Kurds, I guess, are relatively close to that border and tend to live in a region close by, I think what's happening is potentially that they could be being armed, being given weapons to go and attack the current power structure in Iran. And what you're seeing with regards to this reporting is that it seems as if Iran is still bombing some of those internal threats that they perceive as trying to, usurp their power structure. So, that's kind of the latest in terms of what's happening. I will keep you guys posted as I learn more on the matter, but it is my hope that this situation resolves itself, because the cost of everything is going up and it's having a real effect on people. There's also been some talk that there may be a little bit of a rift taking place between the U.S. and Israel. So recently, I believe Trump may have warned Iran about a bombing because there was a recent bombing. Let's go ahead and play a little bit about that, and then we'll jump into the Israel story.
On Monday, US President Donald Trump launched Project Freedom. It was an escort mission to guide foreign ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Within 48 hours, he has paused it. Trump posted about it on Truth Social. He said the call was made based on Pakistan's request. However, America's blockade of Iranian ports remains intact. The announcement was abrupt. So what led to this change of plan? Within just hours of kicking off an ambitious escort mission in one of the world's most key waterways, here's what makes this even stranger. Just hours before Trump's announcement, Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of War, was at a Pentagon podium. He said the United States had successfully secured a path through the strait, that hundreds of commercial ships were lining up to pass through. Secretary of State Marco Rubio went even further. He called the escort mission a favor to the world.
Iran has to pay a price. They're not going to change their position out of the kindness of their heart. There has to be a pressure point on them that causes them to realize they cannot continue to close the straits, or they face crushing economic consequences.
Their boss has now taken the wind out of their sails. Were they even briefed? Because the contrast between what Rubio and Hegseth said and what Trump posted, in just a few hours, it's hard to miss. Now, Rubio also confirmed that Operation Epic Fury, America's military campaign against Iran, has concluded. So in the span of a few days, the major operation is declared over, Hormuz mission is paused, and the man at the top is hoping for a final agreement. Trump said Iran should do the right thing, and again indicated Tehran's loss in the conflict.
They should wave, they're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially that's already what they should wave the white flag of surrender. In hockey, they say, uncle, right? When are they gonna cry uncle? But, and they have another expression. If this were a fight, they would stop it.
Trump is also calling this war a little skirmish. That's quite the reframe for a conflict that began with US and Israeli strikes on the 28th of February. A conflict that was supposed to be about Iran's nuclear program, its missiles, its regional reach. Instead, it got swallowed by a strait. Reports now indicate that the United States and Iran may be getting close to agreeing on a one-page memo. Here's what we know. The deal might be based on a one-page framework. Remember that this is not a final deal. This memo will only set the rules for what both sides agree to do next, so they can negotiate a bigger and final agreement later. The United States reportedly expects Iranian response on key points within the next 48 hours. Iran says the US proposal is under review. And if Iran disagrees, Trump says America will resume its attacks at a much higher intensity than before. If the deal is finalized, Iran would commit to a moratorium on nuclear enrichment, meaning it will freeze its enrichment of uranium. For how long? Earlier, Iran had proposed 5 years. America reportedly demanded 20. This range now being discussed is somewhere between 12 and 15. In return, the United States would lift sanctions and release billions in frozen Iranian funds. Both sides would also reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran will have to commit to never building a nuclear weapon. According to reports, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is holding talks with US officials to get a better understanding of the memorandum. As I mentioned, nothing has been signed yet, but the world does not wait for a signature. Oil prices fell sharply today, and fresh hopes of an end to the 2-month-long war. Brent crude is now trading below $100 per barrel mark. It has fallen more than 10% in a single day. Cheaper oil lifted equities. Yesterday, the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq hit new records, driven again by tech firms. And today, Asian markets opened high. So the markets are surely high on hope. But is that hope premature? Because Hormuz itself tells a different story. Iran has announced a new body. It's the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. It's a new mechanism, and under it, every commercial ship wanting to transit Hormuz must now seek Tehran's approval first. The ships will get instructions by email, and they will have to adhere to the rules as well as get prior clearance. Commercial ships will have to coordinate transit movement with the Iranian military, and at the same time, the US Navy has been warned against operating in the strait. Shipping through the strait also remains tense. Before Trump paused the mission, only 2 ships safely crossed the waterway. There were reports of firings between the United States and Iran. Yesterday, a cargo vessel was struck by an unknown projectile. Even the UAE came under attack for 2 straight days, although Iran denied any involvement in those attacks. So tensions remain high. But is the deal close? The signals say yes. But a pause is not peace. A 1-page memo is not a treaty. A halt on uranium enrichment for so many years is something Iran has always been averse to. Will Tehran even agree to it? We might find out in the next 48 hours. As the United States and Iran remain locked in a dangerous standoff over the Strait of Hormuz, China is moving closer to Tehran. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has met his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi in Beijing today. It's Araghchi's first China visit since the war involving Iran, the United States, and Israel began. These talks come just days before US President Donald Trump is expected to travel to Beijing for high-stakes talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And already China is signaling it wants a bigger say. Beijing says it is prepared to play a greater role in shaping the future of this conflict. It has publicly called for the Strait of Hormuz to reopen as soon as possible.
The current regional situation is at a critical juncture of transition from war to peace. China believes that a complete cessation of hostilities is imperative. Restarting the conflict is even more unacceptable, and persisting in negotiations is particularly important. China supports Iran in safeguarding its national sovereignty and security, and appreciates Iran's willingness to seek a political solution through diplomatic channels.
Now, here is the real question. Is China trying to help end the crisis or simply expand it for its leverage through it? Why do we ask this? Because while China has largely remained silent, maintaining a carefully calibrated public posture in the Iran war, its actual role may be far more consequential. Officially, Beijing has kept a relatively low profile. It's called for de-escalation, backed diplomatic engagement, and even supported the so-called mediation efforts pushed by its all-weather ally, Pakistan, even as it tried and failed to bring peace between the United States and Iran. It has been reported that Tehran and Beijing have maintained close communication during the 9 weeks of conflict between Iran and the United States, and that their top diplomats held at least 3 phone calls. But beyond the peace posturing, there were reports that suggested Chinese firms may have continued supplying Iran with dual-use technologies during the war. I'm talking everything from drones, components, industrial materials, to satellite-linked capabilities that could strengthen Iran's surveillance and military planning. That distinction matters because dual-use supplies do not just mean direct weapons. If true, then it means that China significantly enhanced Iran's wartime capability. What does that mean strategically? It means China may be trying to benefit from the crisis without owning its consequences. And remember, these talks are not happening in a vacuum. They come just before Trump's Beijing visit next week. Yes, trade will dominate the official agenda, but Iran and Hormuz could become critical leverage points. Why? Because China is one of Iran's biggest economic lifelines, and because more than half of China's seaborne oil imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So Beijing has major stakes here. Any disruption threatens Chinese energy security, but it also gives Xi Jinping an opportunity. If China uses its economic weight over Tehran, it could potentially influence Iran's behavior. That leverage could become a kind of a bargaining chip with Washington. And that is why China's role should be viewed with caution. Because Beijing is not simply a neutral observer. It has strategic ties with Iran, it has energy dependence in the Gulf, and it has every incentive to use this crisis to expand its geopolitical influence, particularly ahead of talks with Donald Trump. China's coordination with Tehran is very crucial, and this meeting between Wang Yi and Abbas Araghchi suggests that both countries are aligning more closely, and the United States will be watching very carefully. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has already publicly urged Beijing to use its influence on Tehran, because keeping Hormuz open is also in China's own interest. But so far, Beijing has largely resisted directly backing Washington's approach. So as Trump and Xi prepare to meet on the 14th of May, the bigger issue may not simply be whether China can help. It will be interesting to see if Beijing is more interested in resolving the conflict or exploiting it. A US military aircraft has sparked a mystery over the Persian Gulf. The plane was operating in one of the world's most sensitive regions. During the flight, it sent a 7700 emergency code. That signal is used when an aircraft faces serious problems. Shortly after that, the plane disappeared from public radar. The aircraft was a KC-135 Stratotanker. It is one of the US military's most important refueling planes. This incident has now raised serious questions. Did the aircraft suffer a technical failure or was it hit? Our next report explains.
An enormous American military aircraft was flying over the Persian Gulf. At first, the mission looked routine. The jet moved through one of the world's most heavily monitored airspaces. Then flight trackers noticed something strange. The plane began circling above the Gulf. Moments later, it transmitted a 7700 emergency code. That signal is recognized worldwide. Pilots use it during serious in-flight emergencies like mechanical failure or fire on board. Then, the aircraft disappeared from public radar. No official explanation followed, no wreckage was found, and suddenly one of Washington's most important military assets became the center of a growing mystery. The aircraft in question was a Boeing KC-135 Stratotanker. Experts often call it a flying gas station, because that is exactly what it does. The tanker refuels fighter jets in midair, and it extends the range of surveillance aircraft for hours. Without these flying tankers, American air operations become far more limited. The KC-135 has served the US Air Force for more than 60 years. Modern versions can carry nearly 90,000 kilograms of fuel. Its value runs into tens of millions of dollars, but its strategic importance is far greater. Flight tracking data showed the tanker operating near the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow waterway has become one of the world's most tense military zones. The aircraft had reportedly taken off from a US air base in the United Arab Emirates. After transmitting the emergency signal, the aircraft reportedly turned towards Qatar. Then it vanished from tracking systems. That immediately triggered fears of a crash or attack. But disappearing from public radar does not always mean a plane has been destroyed. Military aircraft sometimes stop broadcasting their location. Electronic interference can also disrupt tracking systems, and the Gulf is now dense with electronic warfare activity. So far, there is no official confirmation that the tanker was shot down or lost. The US military has not announced a crash. No debris has been reported, and no hostile action has been confirmed. but the region has already claimed American aircraft before. Just weeks ago in mid-April, the US Navy confirmed the loss of an MQ-4C Triton surveillance drone near the same waters. That drone was worth more than $240 million. It was one of America's most advanced unmanned aircraft. Reports said it also transmitted a 7700 emergency code before disappearing. And in March, a KC-135 was destroyed in Iraq. 6 crew members were killed. Iran-backed armed groups claimed responsibility for that. That attack laid bare a fundamental vulnerability. These aircraft are enormous. They move slowly and they carry massive amounts of fuel. That makes them highly valuable, but also highly vulnerable. Now, wider questions are growing around American losses in the conflict. Some estimates suggest between $2.3 and $2.8 billion worth of US military equipment may have been destroyed since February 28. That includes aircraft, drones, radar systems, and surveillance assets. But many claims remain unverified. Right now, nobody knows exactly what happened over the Gulf. The aircraft may have landed safely. It may have suffered a technical failure. Or it may be the latest casualty in a conflict that is proving to be far costlier than Washington has acknowledged.
Are you still doom scrolling through world news and feeling completely drained? Decades of unresolved.
Okay, so that was the latest developments. There are certain things that we're not seeing here in the U.S. Because certain things don't get talked about. Like, obviously one of our planes got shot down. That didn't get reported. So, unless you have sources that is willing to share the information, we now have selective news that gets presented to us, really to build a narrative. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality that we live in. With regards to, this conflict as a whole, I just hope it gets settled sooner rather than later, and that we're able to move on from the conflict. All right, guys, I thank you for joining me for this particular episode, just showcasing what the latest development has been. I also invite you to like and subscribe if you're not already connected to our community. But I also ask that you share and let your voice be heard. Comment in the comment box about some of the developments revealed in this particular episode and others, and let's keep each other informed about what's really going on. All right, guys, thank you very much, and until we meet again, God bless you. Later.